Hello everyone and welcome back to Another Mother. This is a faith and parenting podcast by My Spring Harvest with me, Emma Borquay. I am a mum of two little ones. I've got Ezra who is 4 and Hallie who is 1. And I guess like most of us have experienced in life, things can be unpredictable. Life can be full of ups and downs and curveballs, especially when you've got kids. So in season 1 of the podcast, I decided to go out there and speak to 9 incredible people to hear more about their parenting experiences so that I could learn from them and share in their wisdom. So now we are back for season 2 and I am seeking the answers to my never-ending questions. And we're also going to cover some really interesting topics. So today, I am joined by the wonderful Anna Kyle. Hello, Anna. Welcome. Hello. So a little intro to Anna. So Anna is a mum of 4, and she's also the children's worker at a local church. And many people don't actually know that I also work part-time as a youth worker in another local church, and our churches are connected. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we often have staff meetings together. And in these meetings, we have to share, well, we don't have to, but you can share stories of what God has been doing that week, amazing testimonies, just ways that you've seen God moving. And Anna always has these like incredible stories of how children have encountered God. And it's really stirred my faith actually, like as a parent, hearing those stories. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to get Anna on the podcast because I think like so many parents would really want to know more about how, not even just to introduce faith to your kids, but how to encourage faith in your kids, how to help them grow in their faith and feel confident in their faith. And I think that's something that you do so beautifully through the church, but also probably with your own kids. But yeah, so we're going to hear some of your stories in a little while, hopefully. But before we start, I would love to know a bit more about you, and I think everyone else would like to get to know you a bit more. So you've got 4 children.
My oldest is Penny, who's 10. Then I have Corbin, who is 8. Then Kimball, who is 6. And Robin, who's 2.
Okay.
Nearly 3. Yeah.
So your life is pretty much full to the brim with kids, because if you've got 4 kids at home and then you work with kids in church too.
Yes.
It's a lot of kids.
It's crazy. Yeah. Why would you do that? Yeah.
But you're quite passionate about like faith in general, aren't you? And it's something that you've grown up with your whole life. So where was it? You grew up in Scotland?
In Scotland.
Yes.
So I grew up in a Christian home. My mum is Mexican and she came to faith when she was at university. And she has a really strong, alive faith, in her way, in her Mexican way. And my dad, who is Scottish, but then grew up in like the mountains in Peru because his parents were missionaries out there, is, also has a really vibrant faith, but in a really different way, because he's like an incredibly reserved man and very like intelligent, thoughtful. So actually my mum and dad are so different. It doesn't make sense actually. So growing up, we grew up in a small city in Scotland, Dundee, even though my parents actually met in Colombia and had me in Mexico, but then moved to Scotland. And so me and my 2 younger sisters all grew up in Dundee.
Wow.
We spent our whole childhood in Dundee, and we went to one church that whole time, and it was a Baptist church. It was like I would say like a vibrant church. Like there was a big kids ministry, a lot of families, a lot going on. And really amazing guy who was the minister. We did go to church every Sunday, but it wasn't just about that. It was just kind of part of our story.
Church was very much kind of something that you just did as a family, as part of, I guess, just it was normal. You had always gone to church. You would go, and like you said, it was the same church every Sunday. And same, like just a very kind of samey environment. But actually for you, it was more in your teen years, wasn't it? That you maybe encountered God in a more personal way, as like a personal decision. And that was it like a, I was going to say a band camp, not a band camp. What was it called? Like a youth camp.
Yeah, youth camp. Yeah, I went, for sure. In my teens was when I feel like the faith part of my life became something that I chose and I like took ownership of, and I felt like, oh yeah, this is something that I choose and I want to share with the world. So like a big kind of milestone for me was going to a youth camp. It's called Teen Ranch, that we were just very blessed to have this like local camp that was like a summer camp in America, but it was in the countryside in Scotland. And it was really like evangelistic. So the whole point of the camp was that they would get kids in and give them like the best week in the summer and do like horse riding. It was like ranch themed. So all the staff had like plaid shirts and cowboy hats.
Love it.
Like you did horse riding every day, canoeing, rifle shooting, archery, like so much fun stuff. It was like the funnest place ever.
Yeah.
And you stay in this big like manor house and dorms, and there was all sorts of craziness that went on. But yes, going there as a teenager, like camping as a teenager, and then I would also, I also volunteered then after that when I got a bit older. I think that environment actually really helped. I guess I had a really good kind of grounding from my family, from my church. But then as a teenager to go and like meet other slightly older teenagers that also seemed kind of fun and kind of cool, talking about their faith.
Yeah.
I think that was a really big thing for me that kind of made me like, oh yeah, it's like, it's okay to be a Christian and it's actually kind of cool and kind of fun. Yeah. And we can talk about this together and encourage each other. And like, we'd have like devotionals in the dorm rooms, but then also like as a staff, then like voluntary staff would have devotionals in the evenings. And so like the young people would lead them, and, I guess like giving the kids or the youth that responsibility of like leading a devotional or whatever it was, I think gave us as a youth the ownership then of like, this is my faith and I'm gonna talk about it and discuss it and pray together. And so
that's so awesome.
Yeah,
because like many people might not know, but Another Mother is a podcast that's presented by Spring Harvest, which is also an event. And I think there's something so profound about having like set time away, even if it's just a week, where especially as a young person, where you get to meet other like-minded people or people who maybe aren't even like-minded, and you can explore your faith together. And I know for so many people it can be such like a stake in the ground moment for them in those weeks of like you said, being around other people who you realize, oh, maybe I'm not the only Christian in the whole world, or there are other ways to explore this faith, or that you get more opportunity, like you said, to lead a devotional or like different responsibilities. So I think those kind of weeks away are so great.
For sure. Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. And I think for me as a kid and as a teenager in Scotland, like in school, I didn't have any friends that were Christians. And at church, you know, I did have friends at church, but not loads. And so I definitely kind of feel like I had this thing that I probably still in my adulthood kind of sometimes battle that like being a Christian makes me really weird and really different from everyone else. And then I'm like really embarrassed about that. Yeah. And, you know, it's something I need to hide. And I think that like the camp definitely helped me like meet other people who were like normal and fun. And it was like, it's not only okay to be a Christian, like it's amazing, you know. Your
kind of faith journey has led you to where you are now, which is you are at St. Peter's in Brockley, leading the kids ministry there. Yeah. And like I said, kind of when I introduced you, that you just see these different stories all the time, really, of what's going on in the church. And to be honest, I feel like maybe half the congregation has been invited by like a 4-year-old or something, because they're so evangelistic.
There's so many kids in our church.
There are so many kids. It's unreal. Yeah. But yeah, I'm always so encouraged by those stories, because you just think, yeah, go on, kids. Like, yeah, you take the ownership. You do the invite. Yeah. But I think it's funny because often we can have a tendency to downplay what kids experience, and we can be like, oh, they're just being imaginative, or they're just being kids, they don't really get it. But actually really recently, I don't think I've told you this yet, but recently my son Ezra, we were at the fun fair. He's 4 years old, and there was no one else there. It was like the end of the day. There was literally no one else at this tiny fun fair, and he went on the Ferris wheel, and he was sat on this Ferris wheel on his own going round. And then I was thinking like he's probably not gonna have had like the best time on a Ferris wheel on his own, but he comes off the Ferris wheel and he says, I met Jesus.
Wow.
Or like I saw Jesus. And so then you're like, what do you mean you saw Jesus? I said, what was he wearing? He said he was wearing a gold dress, gold sandals, a gold crown, and there was a gold castle, and he was sitting on a gold chair.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, I haven't been going through the book of Revelation with him.
Yeah.
And in kids' church, I know he had been learning about like the parable of the talents or something. So it wasn't really anything super like descriptive of heaven or anything for him to know this whole like gold thing.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And I was like, so Jesus was on the Ferris wheel. He was like, no, he wasn't on the Ferris wheel. He was in the sky. And I was like, okay, like he was talking to me like, Mum, you're so stupid. Of course he was in the sky.
Yeah.
So then I was like, wow, like, what did Jesus say to you? Because thinking like, wow, maybe like Jesus has imparted some huge wisdom into him.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, Jesus said, what's that? And I said, a Ferris wheel. And he said, oh, cool. And that was it. And I was like,
I love that.
oh. And then he's like, yeah, then I saw a motorbike like on the road. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. We're changing the subject now. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I was just so like,
Yeah.
I think you actually saw Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's like something in my adult brain that you go like, oh, surely not or whatever. But I just think, the description that he gave, and even just remembering that I'd heard stories from you as well about young people encountering the gospel for themselves, or just like really having that in faith. I was like, no, do you know what? I'm going to really like believe this. And like, I'm so happy for him. He saw Jesus. I wish I saw Jesus.
Yeah. That is so cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
It is really cool.
Yeah, I definitely think because kids, they don't come with all the baggage that we come as adults.
Yeah.
And so there's just a freedom, actually. And because their imagination just is so vibrant. And I think, especially when they're so young, that their imagination is still so like, yeah, maybe unicorns might just come at any point, you know?
Like, the expectation.
Yeah, like they're just open to just all sorts of possibilities. And so like just seeing Jesus like on a throne in the sky is like, yeah, cool, there's Jesus. I mean, I'm sure it was Jesus revealing himself to Ezra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was when I told the story to my friend, she was like, maybe Jesus didn't say anything like really profound because it's the idea of like, that could have been scary for him. But actually it's that thing of Jesus being a friend. Yeah. Like, oh, that's cool. You're on a Ferris wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Tell us some of your stories, because I love your stories that you've got.
I think that, I've been doing this job for like 5 and a bit years. And over that time, our kids ministry has grown a lot, and I have definitely grown with it in terms of seeing and like my eyes opening more and more actually to the possibility that like kids can experience God themselves. And I am so convinced though that like there's just so much power in like a child's faith, like the power of prayers from a child. I think there's actually extra power in them, like if you need healing, like if a kid prays for you, I've had so many times where my daughter Penny's prayed for healing, whether it's like for me or for someone else, that like healing has happened.
Wow.
And I just really believe that there's just like an innocence that kids bring, and they believe it and they just go for it, and they're not kind of clouded up by all the things that we get clouded up by, like fear and doubt and I don't know, there's just, I think they've got this like special ability to like get to Jesus and pray the powerful prayers. And I 100% have seen so many times kids hear from God and be able to articulate what God has said to them. And I think that is just such an amazing thing. Like I said, I didn't really have that kind of faith at that age, I would say, like like being introduced to like the Holy Spirit and the power of the Holy Spirit and like the gifts of the Spirit was something that I kind of experienced more in like my student years.
Yeah.
So I think for me then that I just find it so exciting to see kids who like from a young age can be confident in like hearing from God. And that like just this Sunday just passed, actually, we did a session on speaking in tongues.
Wow.
And, you know, and even again, this Sunday, I kind of came into it thinking, how are we going to do this? You know, how's this going to go?
What age are you doing that with?
Yeah, so I am mostly in our older room called Rocket. So it's year 2 to year 6. So primary school age. I was like trying to think through how are we going to facilitate like allowing the kids space to speak in tongues. And, you know, some of them, especially the older ones, like they're a bit too cool for school. And so I was like, this is not gonna, I'm just not sure how this is gonna go.
Yeah.
And even, you know, so I was just thinking, I think we're gonna focus more on learning what it is to speak in tongues, like the concept of speaking tongues, and like read about it in the Bible. And on Sunday morning, like in different prayer times that like I have with like my teams and stuff, like God just spoke really clearly that he had the gift of tongues to give the kids today. You know, so I was like, okay, that's what we've got for today. You know, that this is the gift that God has for kids today. So they're going to, they're going to get that today. And it was just so beautiful to see that happen. Like the way that I did it, you know, we had a time where after, I think, so we'd had worship and then we'd had breakfast, which is very popular. We do that once a month. And then yeah, from the front, then I kind of invited the kids into like a time with God, personal time with God. So like everyone, we're just going to close our eyes. This is time for you to like speak to God. You know, I did a little bit of explaining about the gift of tongues. A lot of them have heard of that before. Some of them haven't. And then I was like, you just yourself, I just want you to ask God, if this is a gift that you would like to have, you know, because this is a really beautiful, special thing that we get to do. It's like a heavenly language that we can communicate with God. And it's not something weird. It's actually something really cool and really special. If you want it, like you can ask God yourself. So like all the kids, and they're really good. Like they really go into like a really quiet moment themselves. Yeah. And that's what I love is that then, you know, you are giving kids the ownership to themselves choose, you know, and I don't want any kid to feel pressurized into anything, because if they're going to go on to like live a life with God, it has to be something that they choose, that they experience themselves. However compliant kids are, eventually they'll come to a point where they want to make their own decisions. And if you've been too pushy, I think they'll be like, do you know what? I want to just find my own thing.
Yeah, you know? It's like the idea of personal discovery. That's way more attractive.
Whereas, exactly. If you give them the space, and do you know what? God will do it. So you don't actually have to worry about it, because God will do it. You ask God for the gift and he'll give it to you. And then I was like, maybe if you want to try it out, like just sort of whisper it yourself, like quietly, and just give it a go. And then afterwards I was like, who feels like they spoke in tongues for the first time today? And there was a few hands.
Wow.
So that was cool. But then what I also did is just asked, has anyone, you know, spoken in tongues before and feels like they would like to share with the group a bit about that? And one of the girls, who's like an older girl in the group, I think she must be like 9 or 10. She was like, yeah, I do. So she came up and she, like, into our little mini mic that we have, like, explained, you know, and I asked her just some questions like, tell me when you've spoken in tongues. And she was like, just when we've been in worship in church. And like, what did it feel like? And was it weird? And she just articulated it so beautifully herself. And I was like, see, that's all, you know, that's all they needed to hear, is like hearing it from her and then having time with God themselves. And so then I was challenged as well, because I wasn't even thinking that was going to happen today, and it did, you know.
Sometimes we can step into something feeling as an adult like, oh, they're going to be too cool for this, they're not going to be into it or whatever, but actually there is like a hunger, I think, for with children especially, for the things of God and just to explore faith, and they're so open to it much more than we would expect, I think. Hello everyone, I'm just interrupting this episode very quickly to let you know that bookings for Spring Harvest 2025 are now open, and I can also let you know the theme for the year. It's going to be all about no greater story following the book of Isaiah. So it's going to be a brilliant week of Bible teaching, worship, all age things for your family, loads of on-site activities, children's groups, youth ministry. It's all there. So head over to springharvest.org to find out a bit more about the event and decide if you want to book on with your family. There's 2 sites, Skegness or Minehead at Butlins. So it's just going to be fun galore. Okay, so head over to springharvest.org and you can check out all the options. I do remember you telling a story about the girl who had learnt loads of Bible stories.
Yeah.
And that genuinely blew my mind.
Yeah. So we do kids church on Sundays, but then I also do an after school club on a Wednesday, which we call Creation Club. Some kids from church come, but some kids of friends come. There's some that are from other faiths come actually, and but they know what they're signing up to, but it's not like too full on in your face. This little girl who comes along is actually, she's a really good friend of my son's, and but her, like, they're not a church going family. Her mom probably does have a faith, but they don't come to church. And I remember there was a time, it was like she was having a tricky time at school, this wee girl, and her mum came and she was in a bit of a mess. And the mum was like, she says she wants to read the Bible. And I was like, brilliant, that's cool. And I had a stash of like some of the kids' Bibles that we use. The one, the Jesus Storybook Bible is the one that we have lots of, that we give out, for baptism. So I just gave her one of those, and I was like, here you go. And I think this, the really precious thing is that she was reading it herself. Mm-hmm. She's my son's age, so she's 7. Because then, like, a little while later, I was driving her home after a play date or something, and I was just asking her, and she was regurgitating like all the stories, and but her mum told me this, she's like, she just reads it on her own like every night, and she got to the end of it, and it's actually quite a wordy book, like, so she'd read it all like herself, and she had all the knowledge. And so, like, for me, that was just so precious, that it was like God is speaking to her, and there was a hunger because she wanted another book. Like, she got to the end and she was like, what's next? Give me the next one.
Yeah.
And her mum as well,
what book can I give you next?
I was like, okay, gosh, let me have a think. What's next?
What's after the Bible?
Where do we go from here? Yeah. To even see someone who's like not coming necessarily to church every Sunday and not necessarily being given loads at home, can actually like hold on to these things, like little things that then she can take away. And like, my prayer obviously is for her is that it will grow into like a really solid faith that she'll have for her whole life.
And that's the thing, isn't it, about the Bible stories, and that's I guess why Jesus even spoke in parables, is because it's those stories that actually live in our hearts, isn't it? And it becomes treasure for us that we can, when you're having a tough day or a tough situation, sometimes it's those little stories that spring to mind. And so you just think, wow, if she's at this young age able to memorize those stories, how much impact that's going to have for her. She's probably going to remember them when she's like 25 still, and even if she went far from church, and those stories will live within her.
It's in her,
which is incredible. Do you have like, I guess for any parents that are listening to this and they're like, oh yeah, I really need to like get on some Bible stories with my kids, are there any like really good, all the stories are good, but are there any that you're like, these are great ones for kids, like the Bible stories? What are your favorite ones to teach?
I mean, I think that I love teaching just about the stories of Jesus. Jesus, the man, who he was, what he did when he was alive. And I think those are the most compelling stories that I think are probably easiest for kids to like hold on to and get most out of.
Because actually some of the themes are quite tricky. It talks about death a lot in the Bible, and like torture almost when you think of like Jesus wearing a crown of thorns or people getting stoned and stuff like that. And these are like very deep topics really that you can't necessarily avoid if you're looking at the Bible. But how do you kind of approach that? And even I guess like describing things like the Holy Spirit and stuff, how do you navigate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about the story of Noah's Ark, and how much that is used for like little kids, play and stories. But actually, the reality of the story is so full on.
Yeah.
So full on.
That's so true.
And I think I remember having a chat with my dad, like quite early on when I had this job, when I was like basically saying this. I'm like, how can I teach young kids about the story of Noah? I don't know if I want to teach them that. Like, it's so like gruesome. Like how, like I don't even really want to tell them the reality of that. And then even like Jesus dying on a cross, like that people killed him and then he got like nailed to a cross and then he died. And that was really full on because everyone saw that. For little kids, but what my dad said to me, which I found so helpful, is that you kind of, you start at like a basic, it's like, if you look at all the different kids' Bibles that there are and the simpler ones, and then they graduate up, you kind of start with this like basic kind of knowledge of like touching on the basic sort of ideas of who Jesus is, who God is, the stories in the Bible or the concepts of our faith, and then you kind of build. And so like as they get older and they get more capable of understanding a little bit more, then you add a little bit more flesh to the concept or to the story. And I don't think it's necessarily that we should shy away from things, but maybe you don't need to go in depth straight away. As they get older, you can build the layers.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. I saw this thing on social media recently where this woman she was a Christian woman, and she was saying how someone somewhere had said that she was like brainwashing her kids by raising them with faith. So like by teaching them Bible stories or by, I don't know, instilling Christian values, for example, in her household. And that could be true of any religion, really. And they were like, oh, you're brainwashing your kids. Like, how are they, if they think that this is the way that you have to live, then they're not getting a chance to think any other way. And then her response was like, well, everything in the world is brainwashing our kids. So like they watch TV and they're being brainwashed by the adverts, or what, like not necessarily brainwashed, but I think if you're going to use the term brainwashing, I don't know, how do you, because I think it can be hard as a parent, especially if you do want to allow your kids to, like what you said, have their own relationship with God and not feel pushy, but to still introduce faith to them. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this concept of like brainwashing?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I think what's tricky as well is that every child is different. And so like every child's journey and experience of God is going to be unique. And I see that so much with my own children, is like they've all kind of gone on already quite different journeys. Not wanting my kids to feel like I'm telling you this is like the way that you have to live your life and this is the truth and whatever. Like there are truths that I give my kids as like as a family, we believe this. We believe that like God made the world, God made you, God loves you, Jesus is God's son, Jesus died and rose again, the Holy Spirit is alive and well, and like you can invite the Holy Spirit in. Like we as a family, this is the faith that we have, and we want you to have that as well and you to walk in that. But yeah, I want so desperately for my kids to not feel like I'm pressurizing them into anything, but they and if they feel like they have the ownership and opportunity to like explore themselves who God is, I just think there's just going to be we're so much more likely for them to actually have a fruitful relationship with God. And I think, you again, I guess as your kids get older, you think more about the language that you're using and how you want to go about, and different parents will do it different ways. And the world is there that is going to affect them in all sorts of ways, and maybe they're, whatever world they're in. Like my kids are in a school that is not a Christian school, and it's really like it's like they have a lot of really beautiful values as a school community, but then one of their values is like there's lots of faiths in the world. And like one of my sons one day came home because his teacher had been teaching about different faiths, and she had said, I'm not a Christian, but I do celebrate Christmas. and then she'd said that she was what was she? a humanist.
Oh, okay.
And so then he came home and he says to me, Mum, I don't want to be a Christian, but I do want to celebrate Christmas.
Okay. He's like, don't take Christmas away from me.
And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, okay, you know, and so that was hard, and but I think the thing is for me is, and I know for him as well, if I just tell him, you are gonna be a Christian,
yeah,
whether you like it or not,
yeah,
that is just not going to work. That's just not going to work with him, and he needs and he's a really smart boy, and so I think he's the type, he will need to just read, but he'll also just need to experience God, and I believe that he has, and I believe that he will, you know. And I guess as a parent and as a kids worker, like, our jobs is to invite our kids into the spaces where they will get the opportunity to do that. It's also that, you know, like, encouraging the type of people that they then build friendships with. You know, obviously also wanting to them to have a mixture of friends and a mixture of people. But like, if they have like some solid friends who are also like gonna encourage them in the ways of the Lord, then that's obviously gonna be a helpful thing. So I think that's definitely, for me as a parent, like something that I want for my kids. Yeah,
it's also like it's a difficult but helpful reminder as parents that our kids are ours, but they're actually God's. And there's so much that we would love to control. Like, I would love to like map out a life plan for Ezra and Hallie and be like, right, do this, do this, do this,
and
do
this is how it's going to go.
And that, and this is how you're never going to feel hurt. You're always going to be happy. Everything's going to go well for you. But that's beyond our control. And it's that kind of submission that our role as parents is to nurture and guide our children. But ultimately, they're still God's children. And God will speak to them direcally, and we don't have to push. And
isn't that so comforting?
Yes, it takes the pressure off, because it is scary, like you said, when they're out into the world, and it only increases as they get older and they can do things by themselves and make their own choices.
Put up the fence to help guide them along, and encourage them and hold them, and but we're not going to be able to like put them on a leash and pull them, you know,
absolutely,
because they're their own people and they'll walk their own path. But they will always, you know, kids, you will, like, you know, I still rely so much on my parents to help with my guiding me through life. So how much your parents affect you is huge.
I would love to know what kind of ways we can, as parents, if we're interested in how we might introduce faith into our homes in a bit more of a fun way or whatever, like not wanting to just leave it up to Sunday school, but actually enabling space for faith conversations, or I don't know, not even crafts or anything like that.
I love maybe a good craft. I love a good craft.
But do you have any ideas for parents kind of introducing faith into their home with their kids?
I think, you know what, I think it's just taking an active interest in like your kids' faith journey. And so I think, you know, and this is what any kids worker would say this, and so forgive me. Like, I think being part of the kids team is a good way to start. Because,
you recruiting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, join the kids team. Yeah, but it is such a lovely way to actually be involved in what is happening in your church and in your kids' ministry, you know. So, like, being aware of what's happening, and then that's, you know, if that is part of your routine, like, then that gives you something to like go on. Like, you could talk about what we were talking about in church, or what you mentioned, or what you experienced that Sunday. Like, if you don't know anything that's happening in kids' church and you just go and you just leave, you know, and pick them up and never even talk about that, then you're kind of already making it something quite separate and distant, you know, and not part of your family. Whereas I guess if you're taking an active interest, you want to know what's happening, and then at least have a bit of conversation about it, if not be able to like build on it. I think devotionals, there's some lovely kids devotionals, and especially as your kids get older and they can read for themselves, like my other story, then that's a really lovely way to then have that little bit of time. Like, I, for sure, like my oldest daughter, that time in the evenings where we like say goodnight and I get into bed next to her and we like chat. We always pray, but also it's just like such a good way to kind of reflect on what is going on right now, you know, on our day, what's going on tomorrow, and then we give it to God together. And I just really see how much like her faith is so alive, because I can hear it in her prayers.
Wow.
And so even simple things like that, like just creating the space, I think, to like connect and then to like bring all the things together to God is has been really precious for me with her. I think I've seen that as like creating that space like in the evening. And then I guess modeling it to your kids, because how can we expect our kids to do something that we're not modeling ourselves, you know? So like if you're taking time in the mornings to spend time with God, or in the afternoons, or if you're bringing God into your everyday decisions that allow you to connect with God, if your kids are seeing that and inviting them into that, then just gives it so much. It's just so much then obviously so much easier for them to like want to do that, because they look up to us and they see what we do, and you know, hopefully they want to aspire to do something similar.
Yeah, there's a beautiful song. You might have heard it by, is it Stephanie Gretzinger? I might have said her name wrong. But the song is "No One Ever Cared for Me Like Jesus." And one of the lines is like, "Let my children tell their children, let this be their memory, that all my treasure was in heaven and you were everything to me." And it's about how, like you want your kids to see that you're not even storing up earthly treasures, that everything to you is Jesus, and that you can really live that out to be true as something that they would then want to pass on. And you're so right, like we really do model so much to our kids. We have such a huge influence over them, especially in these young years. Like I've seen those graphs where it's like the time you spend with your kids as they get older, and it just like massively declines, but you've got such a significant amount of time with them in the earlier years that you've got such a ability to influence their lives and really instill some like amazing values and a feeling of being loved and known. And so it's a big journey that we've got as parents, a big responsibility. But it's great. Yes. Oh no, thank you so much, Anna, for all of your wisdom. And thank you for all that you're doing with the kids in your church as well, because it impacts the whole area, the whole local area, having all these kids like evangelizing. But we really appreciate you, and we appreciate kids workers all around the world.
Kids workers, they do a hard job.
Yes.
But, no, thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. Thanks. Such a joy.
Yay. Thank you so much for listening to Another Mother. Don't forget to subscribe for future episodes, and please do help us spread the word about this podcast. You can share it with your friends, with other parents that you know, other mums, grandparents, or just anyone that you think might enjoy these episodes.